A picture of a young man with a smile that could shatter a mirror was taken on September 7th, 1967, at Caxton Hall in London. He recently wed Angie King, an Anglo-Indian model who will be murdered after leaving him for Jimi Hendrix in 2 years. He is still unaware of all of this. He is unaware that he will be fired at gunpoint by War, the funk band he will soon front. He has no idea that John Lennon will use the song "I Am the Walrus" to immortalize his sexual habits. He is only aware of the flashbulb's heat and the flavor of his breakfast beverage at that precise moment. Eric Burdon is his name. The majority of the harm is still to be done, and he is 26 years old. This is the story of a life filled with stolen credit and smoke songs. The Eggman Cometh, Eric Burdon, and the Price of the Blues is another name for it. Greetings from Rock and Roll Mysteries. On May 11th, 1941, Eric Victor Burdon arrived in Walker, a small soot-choked district on the north bank of the Tyne in Newcastle, England. The timing wasn't particularly auspicious. Walker was the type of location that German bombers appeared to find easy at night, and Britain was in the middle of the Blitz. Matt, his father, worked as an engineer. In the 1930s, his mother, Renee, moved to Newcastle from Ireland via Scotland. They were putting in a lot of work. In a 1967 radio interview with Geordie Val, Burdon told Studs Terkel that Val was still unadulterated. Yes, my father worked as an engineer. Up until recently, my mother was employed by a very working-class company. Victor was not a sentimental choice for a middle name. It was an exercise in patriotic branding. Mothers who gave their wartime children appropriately victorious names were eligible to receive a £25 bounty from Newcastle's Lord Mayor. It was Eric Victor. His early years were a nightmare fit for Charles Dickens, and he had a younger sister named Irene. The boy's asthma attacks, which left him gasping and wheezing every day due to river pollution and Newcastle's constant dampness, would plague him for decades and, ironically, contribute to his eventual relocation to the dry air of California. According to him, his elementary school was surrounded by a shipyard and a slaughterhouse on the banks of the Tyne, and the boy was forced to sit in the back of classes with 40 or 50 children where he was harassed by both teachers and students. He called those early school years a nightmare. Walker embodied the harshest aspects of post-industrial Britain. A scene of smoking chimneys, terrace houses, and the air's ubiquitous gray wash. The hammers in the shipyard, which could be heard from the schoolyard, were essentially a prediction of what most of those boys would do in the future. It was not a setting that was intended to produce singers, artists, or anyone who might one day be shooting out chandeliers at bear parties while Jim Morrison was hiding in the corridor. However, Eric Burdon's trajectory was not planned. Against all reasonable expectations, it was willed into existence, skirted, and improvised. Art and the music saved him, or at least diverted him. Burdon enrolled at Newcastle College of Art to pursue his studies in photography and graphics. He said that he was an art student long before he became a frontman, and that because he had seen movies before, they probably had a greater influence on him than music. This is a lineage. Liverpool College of Art was where John Lennon was enrolled. Keith Richards fought his way through Sidcup Art College. Pete Townsend went to Elling. Nobody had anticipated how rock and roll would develop within the British art school system of the late 1950s and early 1960s, and no government minister would have supported it if he had known. For intelligent, restless children who didn't fit the grammar school mold, it served as a haven. Additionally, it introduced them to American culture, bohemian concepts, and one another. Burdon took it all in. However, the jazz clubs were where the true conversion took place. He began hanging out at a smoky, depressing Newcastle hangout where the people were, in his own memorable words, like a motorcycle gang without the motorcycles. They were tough, hard drinking, and completely enamored with American music. In a parallel universe where Alexis Corner, whom Burdon subsequently referred to as the godfather of the British blues movement, acted as a gateway figure into a larger London network. This scene would contribute to the larger British blues boom. Burdon came across the Clapton Circle, the future Rolling Stones, and the entire fermenting ecosystem that was poised to transform popular music through Corner. Burdon's obsessions grew from the downbeat. He told Terkel that in order to comprehend any fundamentals, one must trace their origins. He described his own journey from traditional jazz to more profound roots in Black American music and, in his own words, back to Africa. In this world, he was not a tourist. His devotion to Black American music was complete, intricate, and intensely personal, and he was a convert. Later, with more candor than most of his peers could muster, he acknowledged the unsettling reality. My leader and hero was the Negro. I did my best to sound exactly like him. Although the power dynamics it described were not disarming, the honesty was. The selection of t-shirts we have created for you, which includes 3 recently released designs, is sure to please any rock and roll enthusiast. Graham Parson, Jeffrey Lee Pierce, Screaming Jay Hawkins, Marianne Faithfull, and other artists are featured on our shirts. You can click the link that appears on the screen right now or click the description to take a look. These are high-quality heavyweight shirts that start at $25 or roughly $20 each and are available in sizes up to 5XL. The US, EU, UK, Canada, and Australia are among the countries to which they ship. Additionally, orders over $100 or 4 shirts total qualify for free shipping if you live in the US. Chester and I are both thrilled by their success, and every sale is a huge help to us in managing the channel. Many thanks to all of you. Now let's return to Eric's amazing ascent to fame. Burdon had located his car by the early 1960s. He joined the Alan Price Rhythm and Blues Combo, a Newcastle-based R&B group that performed locally, especially at the Club A-Go-Go, a basement venue on Percy Street that served as the hub of the burgeoning Northeast blues scene. Mike Jeffrey, who would later become the Animals' manager, and according to Burdon's later account, one of the masterminds behind their financial collapse, operated the A-Go-Go. Eric, the art student, had been asked by Jeffrey to assist with the interior design of the club, a detail that encapsulates a key aspect of the time. In addition to performing, the artist decorated the venue. It was all managed by the man who would later make sure he was never paid fairly. The A-Go-Go was traversed by American blues musicians on tour. They were backed by Sonny Boy Williamson II, John Lee Hooker, and the Animals, who listened to the music up close. According to Burdon, Hooker was unable to write his own name at the time, so he took care of him during his visits to the UK, including signing autographs on his behalf. The story was instructive. Intimacy and devotion were evident, but so were the unfair arrangements that characterized mid-century touring, in which Black American performers frequently performed for audiences unaware of their meager compensation. By the end of 1963, Jeffrey had gotten the group a recording deal and live bookings in London, and they had changed their name to the Animals, a moniker allegedly imposed on them by fans due to their wild stage persona. The roughness of the lineup was formidable. On the keyboards, Alan Price played a Vox Continental organ whose reedy drone came to represent half the band's identity. John Steele played drums, Hilton Valentine played guitar, Chaz Chandler played bass, and Eric, a stocky, fair-faced child from the era, led the way with a voice that sounded like it had been dragged through gravel and set on fire. They moved to London by January 1964, signed with the Columbia Records UK label, and started collaborating with Mickey Moe, a successful factory producer. The next event was one of those infrequent bolts that altered the weather. The House of the Rising Sun, a classic folk ballad about a New Orleans brothel that Burdon had first visited far from the Big Easy, was recorded by the Animals. He later remarked, "I fell in love with this song the moment I heard it in Newcastle's folk clubs." Price's spiraling organ propelled their version, which was tense and electrifying. It ran 4.5 minutes in an era when singles were supposed to clock in under 3. Released in June 1964, it entered the UK chart on July 1st and hit number 1 by July 15th. In America, it topped the Billboard Hot 100 that September. Bob Dylan, who had recorded his own acoustic version, reportedly heard the Animals' arrangement on his car radio and understood instantly that folk music had crossed a Rubicon. Some have credited the Animals with pushing Dylan toward going electric. A claim Burdon himself never shied from repeating, but success carried a worm in its core. When the single was pressed, only one name appeared in the arrangement credit, Alan Price. The reasons have been disputed for 6 decades. The standard explanation is that there was insufficient space on the label for all 5 names and that Price's was used as a placeholder. Eric never bought it. He believed the credit was a deliberate maneuver engineered by Price and manager Mike Jeffrey. A scam, as he called it. The result was that Price collected royalties on one of the best-selling singles of the 1960s, and the other 4 Animals got nothing. "I hope he fries in hell," Burdon said of Price in a 2023 interview, nearly 60 years after the fact. The wound evidently has never closed. Between 1964 and 1966, the Animals were an engine running at dangerous speed. They toured the transatlantic circuit, relentlessly appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show on October 18, 1964, performing The House of the Rising Sun before being cornered and chased by fans in scenes that mirrored Beatlemania's wildest stampedes, and churned out singles with a ferocity that suggested both ambition and desperation. They included Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, It's My Life, Bring It On Home to Me, and the anthem of doomed youth, We Got to Get Out of This Place, which peaked at number 2 in the UK in July 1965. That last song became something more than a hit. American GIS adopted it as an unofficial soundtrack in Vietnam, a howl of escape from a situation that offered none. It gave the Animals a strange second life as a war's emotional wallpaper. But the money was wrong and everyone knew it. As soon as you got into a band like that, you were a prisoner, Eric recalled. The management structures of the era were designed to extract maximum value from young musicians who didn't read contracts. The Animals made fortunes for other people and saw almost none of it themselves. Alan Price departed in May 1965, claiming exhaustion, though the real fractures ran deeper into territory involving credit, cash, and bruised egos. Drummer John Steele followed him out in early 1966. By mid-1966, the original lineup was finished. To some of them, it wasn't worth the bother with so little money being earned. We were the originals of being ripped off, Burdon said in a 2001 interview. To call it the music business is a bloody joke. So Burdon fled to California. The decision was partially based on health. The dry air and part spiritual migration helped him with his asthma. Burdon wanted to join the counterculture, which was boiling over. He later stated, "I didn't have any choice." He put the Animals back together with new members, changed their name to Eric Burdon and the Animals, and made a dramatic shift from Newcastle's raw R&B to San Francisco's psychedelic swirl. "I was so battered, bruised, and confused." He spoke bluntly, as usual, about his experiences with LSD. "I was able to see things differently thanks to acid. I was awakened by it. I experimented a lot. This era's music was ambitious, erratic, and occasionally genuinely amazing." A love letter to the Haight-Ashbury scene was San Francisco Nights. Released in 1968, Sky Pilot was a comprehensive critique of organized religion's hypocrisy in the Vietnam War, a 7-minute epic that spans a single's two sides. With a victory lap set to a rolling rhythm, M. Terry transformed the renowned 1967 pop festival into his own mythology. During this time, his personal life was just as turbulent as the music. Burdon married Angie King at Westminster's Caxton Hall on September 7, 1967. He had secretly desired something. It became a circus when the press arrived in force. The marriage was unstable from the beginning, and Angie was an Anglo-Indian model who was involved in the hippie and music scenes. Burdon was touring non-stop with his new band, drinking hard, and he claimed to be well-versed in the drug culture of Laurel Canyon. The marriage barely lasted 2 years. Angie allegedly left him for Jimi Hendrix of all people when they split up in 1969. But after Burdon, her life took a much darker turn, a figure of mystery and enigma. She appears to have wandered around for a while before settling in Australia in the 1980s. After marrying Eric and meeting Jimmy, she may have faded into obscurity, but on December 19, 1992, she made headlines of her own. In Perth, an estranged boyfriend brutally killed Angela King. A life that had once revolved around the scorching core of the 1960s came to a terrible end. Back in 1967, however, Burdon's actions were making the kind of headlines that managers hate. The Animals were scheduled to perform at the Coliseum in Ottawa, Canada on March 1st of that year. The format caused a rift between the local promoter and the band. The promoter requested 2 sets of 40 minutes each. In order to raise money, the band planned to perform a single 50-minute show. Burdon took a transactional and direct stance. According to the Ottawa Press, he said, "I am a product. As a result, the agency demands payment before I deliver." The band left and never came back when terms could not be reached. Bedlam was what came next. An angry crowd of about 2,500 people stormed into the venue. The estimated amount of property damage was $3,500. A lot of money. 12 people were arrested in 1967. After 5 minor convictions, the most bizarre turn of events occurred. A group of spectators marched to police headquarters in the days following the riot and offered a joint apology for the damage. The Ottawa authorities were perplexed by this act of repentance, which was nearly unprecedented in rock and roll chaos. Everyone apologized for the drunken rioting at the end of the incident, which became a minor legend and a snapshot of what happened when Canadian youth volatility and rock star economics from the 1960s collided. Though lighter is a relative term, Burdon's fame did have a lighter side. John Lennon was one of his London-based friends, and Burdon's social life produced one of the most enduring footnotes in Beatles mythology. According to Burdon's memoir, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, the story started one morning while he was preparing breakfast while completely nude, save for his socks. Sylvia, his Jamaican girlfriend, approached him from behind and cracked an amyl nitrite capsule beneath his nose. He slid to the kitchen floor as the fumes hit, and she grabbed an egg from the counter and cracked it onto his stomach. Burdon described what transpired as a memorable improvisational sexual encounter in which Sylvia gave him with the raw egg in her mouth, probably adding some depth to it all. Later, during a party in a Mayfair apartment, Burdon told Lennon the story. Lennon was overjoyed. That evening, a group of young groupies were John and Eric's guests. Burdon also remembered Lennon raising his head to yell mid-coitus at him as they started their romantic pursuits. Lennon laughed as Burdon remembered, looking over those round glasses that were resting on the tip of his nose. "Go on, go get it, Eggman," he said. After that, his friends continued to refer to him as Eggs. Lennon incorporated the allusion into I'm the Walrus several months later. I'm the Eggman, a private joke that was made public. Burdon admitted that it was one of his more questionable distinctions. Eric Burdon and the Animals had reached the end of their career by the end of 1968. In about 2 years, Burdon released 5 albums. A new project began in 1969 when producer-manager Jerry Goldstein put him in touch with Night Shift, a Long Beach funk group. The combination was incendiary, and they changed their name to War. Howard Scott played guitar, B.B. Dickerson played bass, Harold Brown played drums, Papa D. Allen played percussion, Lonnie Jordan played keyboards, and Danish harmonica player Lee Oscar was part of this mostly black band. However, it was led by a short, powerful white Englishman with a bluesy voice and a desire for novelty. It was impossible to avoid the racial charge. At a time when America's racial fault lines were exploding, Eric became the frontman of a black band. The provocation was made clear right away by the album's title, Eric Burdon Declares War. From the beginning, the partnership was musically successful. Burdon and War became a commercial force when their breakthrough hit, Spill the Wine, peaked in the top 3 in 1970. A million miles away from the damp cell of Newcastle, the song was loose, funky, and built on a groove that felt like a barbecue in the afternoon sun. When they moved into a mansion in Bear, it was a scene straight out of the late 1960s. A revolving group of celebrities, musicians, and hangers-on passed by like characters in a Los Angeles set Fellini movie. Jim Morrison, who brought his own unique brand of inebriated intensity and an entourage of groupies, became a regular uninvited house guest. Burdon was respected by Morrison. The Doors singer was also perplexed and possibly jealous of Burdon's easy way with women, but Jim Morrison respected very few people. Later, Lonnie Jordan recalled a party at the home of producer Jerry Goldstein, where Morrison repeatedly interrupted the musicians, yelling, "Stop. I'll tell you when to sing." Burdon had had enough. Jordan claims that Burdon grabbed a gun and fired the chandelier. Decades later, Jordan recounted the tale with awe and laughter. The Bear Mansion was not for the weak of heart. During this time, Eric also rode motorcycles through the desert near Palm Springs with photographer Linda Eastman, later Linda McCartney, and actor Steve McQueen. It read like the fever dream of a casting director's social life. However, the collaboration's most devastating moment and most potent resonance occurred in London in September 1970. Wool was playing in Soho at the Ronnie Scott Jazz Club. Even though Burdon pinched Eric's wife, Jay Hriz remained a close friend and joined the band for what ended up being his final public jam session. Hicks died a few days later. When Hicks' girlfriend discovered him unresponsive, she called Burdon. Burdon said, "We were the last people Jimmy ever played with." I was quite shaken by it. According to historical accounts, Eric assisted in cleaning Hicks' apartment prior to the arrival of the police. The circumstances surrounding Hicks' death were forever clouded, and there was undoubtedly panic, but also a danger of criminal activity. Burdon was left psychologically unwell after the death struck him like a freight train. The musical and personal fallout happened quickly. Rudyard Kipling was parodied in the album Black Man's Burdon, which placed Burdon's name in the context of black music. However, it caused a great deal of controversy even back then. It encapsulated the uneasiness that some people felt about a white Englishman taking up so much space. Burdon was unraveling, abusing drugs, and drinking excessively. He was called by the other members of the band in early 1971 and informed at gunpoint that his services were no longer needed, according to a significant source close to the band. In rock history, it was among the most bizarre and brutal band dismissals. In less than 2 years, the partnership that produced Spill the Wine and suggested a radical future for multiracial funk rock came to an end. It was a wasteland in the 1970s. Burdon experimented with different lineups of the Eric Burdon Band, tried his hand at solo recordings, and watched as War, now without him, achieved huge commercial success with songs like Why Can't We Be Friends and Low Rider. Without him, the fire continued to burn because he had been the spark. Having contributed to the creation of something essential and then being kicked out only to watch it grow without you was a unique kind of agony. His experience with the Animals, another band that persisted in different guises after his departure, trading on a name and sound he helped create, was echoed by the pattern. Alexandria was the daughter of his second marriage to Rose Galinda Marks on September 17, 1972, but the marriage failed due to touring, cocaine, and the general entropy that follows musicians who never fully get back on their feet. Rose started using cocaine after being abandoned at home with a small child while Bird and crossed continents. The marriage began to deteriorate. The band swiftly broke up again after a brief reunion with the original Animals lineup in 1975. The reunion resulted in a record but no hit singles. In 1977, Burdon relocated to Germany. Although the legal paperwork took until the early 1980s, the divorce from Rose was finally finalized around 1978. According to a somber postscript, Rose and Alexandria disappeared while on an Animals reunion tour in 1983, leaving Burdon in shock and sadness. Later on, he would get back in touch with his daughter and talk warmly about being a grandfather and a father. He even gave her the name of his 2008 album, Mirage. There were more humiliations in the 1980s. During his bizarre stay in Germany, Burdon was imprisoned on suspicion of having connections to the extremist Bard and Meinhof terror gang. After 10 days, he was freed, but according to his own account, the experience hastened his decline into more severe alcohol and cocaine abuse. In 1986, he wrote his first autobiography, I Used to Be an Animal, But I'm All Right Now, in which he admitted that he wasn't sure the second half of the sentence was accurate. During the 1980s, attempts to bring the Animals brand back to life in a touring setting were both artistically and financially insignificant, and they served to exacerbate rather than to ease the animosities between former band members. Throughout it all, Eric held on to a certain perspective on his work, which began when he first heard the blues in a jazz club in Newcastle. Blues was born in the pain and anguish of slavery, he said to an interviewer while working unpaid for the company store. He was aware that the dynamics he described were reflected in miniature in his own career. An artist who, while being exploited himself, creates music with a foundation in exploitation. In 1967, he told Studs Terkel that the blues is a product of American life. Steel mills, police departments, Cadillac vehicles, and jukeboxes. It was written by a man who was raised in a steel mill and was a sociological reading rather than a romantic one. He presented the British blues movement as an effort to save lives. English children are making a special effort to preserve America's authentic art form, jazz, rhythm, and blues. Burdon was more willing than most to sit with a contradiction, but he never fully settled the question of whether this was cultural appropriation, cultural preservation, or both at the same time. A sort of recognition that was more bitter than sweet arrived in the 1990s. Burdon was noticeably not present at the 1994 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony for the Animals. Decades of resentment, legal battles, and the central query of the Animals' true identities complicated the causes. In 2008, a British court gave drummer John Steele complete legal ownership of the Animals' name, providing a direct response to that query, a decision that barred Burdon from performing or recording under the name of the group he had founded and led. Why would I want to honor a band that has caused me so much suffering? I'm not supposed to call myself Eric Burdon and the Animals anymore in Britain, he declared. It was a strangely contemporary kind of eviction, a man who is legally divorced from his past. Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, Eric and Jay's second memoir. Darbo Press published Marshall Craig's book, which discussed the British invasion, the psychedelic era, and the friendships and rivalries that shaped his life. It also included the war saga in Burdon's own rough, unvarnished voice, the Eggman story, and the Hicks account. It's an excellent read. I'll include a link to it below. The Animals' 1965 cover of a Nina Simone song served as the inspiration for the title, which was another example of transatlantic translation that somehow became his entire persona. The long-awaited reunion with War finally occurred during that same period. For the first time in 37 years, Burdon shared the stage with a reformed War on April 21st, 2008, at the Royal Albert Hall. It was officially a different War from the one that had driven Burdon out at gunpoint, and by that time it was Lonnie Jordan's band, the only original member still alive. The music was still good, though. To go along with the show, Reno Records reissued Blackman's Burdon and Eric Burdon Declares War albums. It turned out that even when the past was emotionally radioactive, it was still commercially viable. The burden never ended. Till Your River Runs Dry, his 2013 studio album, was regarded as a true late career statement, raw, bluesy, and unyielding, but its development was halted by a major back surgery that left him bedridden for 6 months. In 2016, he remarked of the House of the Rising Sun, I will probably be singing this song as they lower me into my grave. Furthermore, the comment was more factual than morbid. For more than half a century, the song had followed him. In a 2025 interview, he reflected that it has acquired deeper layers of meaning. After a while, his personal life stabilized. Burdon married Greek lawyer Mariana Pristo in 1999, and she also took on the responsibility of overseeing his professional life. It was his third marriage, and it was successful. After decades of upheaval, Burdon referred to Mariana as his anchor and a constant presence after the couple relocated to Ohio, California. Later on, her Greek ancestry would draw him across the Atlantic in a way that no one had anticipated. He moved to Greece, Mariana's home country, during the CO-19 pandemic in 2021 and started a more subdued life there. In collaboration with a Greek television drama, he recorded new vocals for the song Don't Ever Leave. Thus, the sessions had a negative impact. Burdon was admitted to the hospital with pneumonia shortly after recording. He remarked, in retrospect, it's almost surreal how closely my experience mirrored the track. The blues had a way of penetrating his body even in his 80s. By 2024, he was announcing his comeback to the stage, with an August festival appearance in California planned. "I've been writing and experimenting with new musical directions all the time," he said. The ambition wasn't as old as the voice. The life of Eric Burdon defies neat narrative. He wasn't a martyr. He lived. He wasn't a saint. His recklessness, his ability to harm himself, and his occasional mistreatment of women were genuine and frequently unforgivable. Furthermore, according to his own irate accounting, he was not a wealthy individual. He was, and still is, one of the most forceful and harsh voices to come out of the British invasion. A singer who created a sound that was fiercer than both rock and blues by filtering the suffering of Black American music through the soot and cold of industrial Tyneside. He contributed to Bob Dylan's rise to fame. He provided the unofficial anthem for Vietnam. He turned into the Eggman. In court, he lost the name of his band. At gunpoint, he was fired. No matter how many names they omitted from the label, he continued to sing because it was the one thing they couldn't take away from him. Okay, that concludes this week. If you have a favorite Eric song besides House of the Rising Sun, please share it in the comments. That one is a classic, as we all know. I've been Johnny. We appreciate your interest in rock and roll mysteries. Next week, Chester will be back in the hot seat, and I'll be going back for the next one. We're going to rotate for a while and see how it goes, I believe. In any case, good luck, and I'll see you later. Let's toast.